Hi, it's me, Waffles, and I think you can tell what this is behind me. You can probably tell where I'm going with this, but this is a video on how to make custom portals. Since I reached 1,000 subscribers and people have been asking this for so long, I thought I'd make a video on this, but you will probably see why I hadn't made one on it before. Of course, I don't go over every possible thing you can do with portals in this video, because that would take forever, and also portals are completely custom. You'd have to make them yourself. But if you guys want videos on more specific things about portals, then you can tell me those in the comments and I'll make one about that in the future. Of course, before I start the video, I will show you that, in fact, this portal actually does work, because I'm not going to clickbait you or anything. I can walk into it and it'll take me to the Aether. And of course, this doesn't look like the Aether from the Aether mod. This is just a placeholder. You can see that it is, in fact, a custom dimension in the top left, so you can make this anything you want. If I put a pig in the portal, it goes to another dimension. And if I go through the portal, you can see that there is a pig here. That's the second one I've sent through. You didn't see the first one. Anyways, this is my custom portal system, so keep watching if you want to learn how custom portals work. So one thing that I'm going to need to make clear before starting this video is that this video is aimed at people who already have at least a bit of an understanding of how function data packs work. For instance, you're going to need to know the stuff in pack.mc meta, and that will be linked in an iCard up here if you don't. And you're also going to need to know how to create functions, and I do have a video on that, which I will also probably link in an iCard if you don't know how to do that yet. So you will notice that I actually have three namespaces. The first is the Aether namespace, and this just includes a custom dimension called the Aether. That's because the portal that I'm using as an example is the same as the Aether portal from the famous Aether mod, and this is just going to be the dimension that the portal is leading to. If you don't know how to make dimension stuff, then I'm not really sure why you're here, because this is for the custom dimension that you've probably already made, but if you don't know how to do that yet, then I will link an iCard to the playlist. So anyways, I'm not going to be going over the Aether dimension, especially because it's just a copy of the overworld. What we're all here for is the functions part. So what I'm going to be doing in this video is a bit different from what I usually do. Usually what I do is I tell you exactly how to do something, and you can follow along with exactly what I'm doing. But instead, in this video, I'm just going to be showing you how my pack works, the one that I've made, and you can either copy me, because there's a download in the description as usual, or you can make your own pack that uses the same kinds of ideas as this pack uses, which is what I would recommend, because I don't claim to be the most expert function maker ever, so this pack could be perfect, or there could be some changes that you would like to make. So getting onto the actual functions, of course, in the Minecraft namespace, I just have a folder called tags and then functions, and then I have load and tick.json, and both of these are running the functions in my WAB portals namespace, load and tick, as it says right here. Before I actually go into those functions, I'm going to talk about the predicates and tags. So the first predicate is the dimensions predicates, and I've gone ahead and made one for all three of the vanilla dimensions and one for my custom dimension. Of course, you're only going to make your portal go between two dimensions, because otherwise that would get confusing, kind of like how nether portals can only be built in the overworld or nether but not the end. So you only really need the predicate for whichever dimensions you are using. But as you can see, it's just a simple location check and then a dimension. And I will have the code for this in a paste bin in the description. And so that's just going to make it so you can tell which entities are in which dimensions, and that's going to be really useful later on. Then there's also travelers, and this predicate is all mobs. It excludes all of the entities that you probably don't want going through your portals, so those are projectiles, and then things like withers and ender dragons. Another thing it does, this is something that I worked in because I'm planning on using this kind of data pack for my war dimension on the Waffles SMP, is a way to block specific entities from going through the portals, and of course, you don't need to use this. I just felt like I should maybe include it. But anyways, all of this code will also be in the paste bin and the pack download in the description. However, it's also a pretty simple predicate. I just have a bunch of sections excluding specific entities from going through the portal. So that seems pretty complicated, but all it is checking which dimension something is in, and then checking if it's allowed to go through the portal. You won't need to change anything there except for this file. You will need to rename it to the name of your dimension. So for example, if my dimension was called Waffle, I would rename it Waffle. and you would have to change the name of the dimension in here. So that's all you're going to need to change there. However, moving on to the tags section, I have tags and then blocks and then air.json, and this is basically just all types of air in the game. I also have 3 folders: activation, frame, and portal, and each of those inside has a file named after my dimension. So you will need to change the name of that file to match the name of your dimension, and you can also create multiple files if you want to make multiple kinds of portals. So this is just going to be the block that is used to activate the portal. So since my portal uses water to activate it, it's water, and the nether portal uses fire to activate it, so that would be fire. You can make this any kind of block you want. The frame is what the frame is allowed to be made of, so mine is glowstone, but if you want to add more possible blocks, then you can just add a comma and a new kind of block. So say you want to make it stone, you could do that. And that just means that a player will be able to build a frame out of multiple kinds of blocks. And then lastly is the portal one, and this is the blocks that actually make up the inside of your portal. So you can either leave this as air, or you can make it moving pistons like I did. And if it is moving pistons, that means nobody can place a block inside of the portal. So it looks like air, but you can't break or modify the blocks inside, which kind of makes it act like another portal, because you can't place blocks within the nether portal frame while it's activated. So again, that may seem complicated, but it makes it a lot easier later on, and all you have to do is create a folder for those blocks. So now that you've seen the predicates and the tags that the functions need in order to work, I'm just going to go over the functions that I created in this data pack. So of course in functions there's going to be load and tick. So load creates a bunch of scoreboards that you're going to need, and each of these scoreboards is described by the line above it. So this scoreboard objectives: add Aether portal activation check, used water bucket, is just to check if I have used the activation block that is needed to open the portal. So you can change this to whatever your activation block is, and change Aether in the name to whatever the name of your dimension is. And then all of these ones don't need to be modified. There is the player reach range, and this is used in raycasting. Basically, you're trying to find the block at which this item was placed, and at that block you're going to create a portal. This WA portal's timer is not actually used in any of the functions, but I'll show you a way that you can use it because it could be helpful. WE portal's cooldown here is just setting a cooldown for using the portal, because if there was no cooldown, it would just immediately teleport you back and forth through both dimensions. So this way it makes it so it's, I think, 15 seconds before you can be teleported back to the other dimension by a portal. So then in tick, what it does is it sets the player's reach range to 13, and that is just for this function right here, the locate block function, which I will show you in a second. You need it to be 13 because by testing, that seems to be about the right amount of times that the raycast function will need to work in order to test all of the blocks that the player could have placed the block at. And then this immediately after it does the raycast sets the Aether portal activation check to 0. And what that's going to do is, if this raycast is complete and it turns out that you did not actually put a block in the right place to create a portal, it will just reset that, so that way it doesn't get confused later on. Then right here, this function, waffles are better portals, run main Aether, that is just to keep this nice and tidy. So you can just copy this if you want and paste it again, and that and then change this to name of a different dimension, and that way you can have multiple commands for multiple portals run at the same time without cluttering up this file. And then this last part here is the cooldown. Execute as something that can travel through the portal unless their score equals their score. So basically, if they don't have a score, because if they don't have a score then their score can't equal itself, then it will set their cooldown to 0. So that's basically just making sure that the player has a cooldown score, and if they don't have a cooldown score, it will make them have one. Then this last part down here, execute as that player if their cooldown is greater than 1, and if they are not standing in a portal, it will then remove 1 point from their cooldown, and I will show you again once we get to that part how the cooldown is actually set up, so you can see what it really does. And this timer, as I said, is not used. It's just a way to set up a timer in order to make it so commands don't all run at the exact same time, because that might cause a bit of extra lag. And so if you want to optimize the pack, you can use this. And to do that, you're just going to have to add function UAV portals timer, and that will run this, and then you can use stuff in here to run the code at different times, and I will have a link up here to a video where I talked about how to use timers. Now it's time to get into how the portal actually works. So the first thing I'm going to go over is this code right here, the locate block either. So I'm going to go into activate right here, and then locate block either. So again, this will just be named whatever your dimension is. What this is doing is it is removing 1 reach range every time it does the command, and then if your reach range is still greater than 1 and the block where you are is air, as defined in this tag here, it will run this same function again half a block in front of where you're looking. So if I go back to the tick, you'll see that at the beginning it sets the range to 13. Since it has a range of 13, it will do this 13 times before it runs out. So this is just going to test every block directly in front of where you're looking 13 times, moving forward a little bit each time. And then each time it moves forward, it is going to run this detection thing here to detect if the block where it is positioned is the activation either block. And that was in tags here. The activation block is water, and since this is triggered whenever you place a water block, it's just trying to find where that water block is. And so if that block is water, and if the block below it is part of the Aether portal frame, which is also specified in the tags here, it will then run this function. So if the block is water and the block below that is the Aether portal frame, that means it might be placed on the bottom of the frame, and so it's then going to run this function to check whether there is a complete frame there. If the block is water and it is 2 blocks above a valid block of the Aether portal frame, it's then going to run this function to test whether it is in the middle of a frame, and if it is 3 blocks above, then that means it might be at the top of the frame, so it's going to do the same thing. So basically what all of this is doing is trying to find the activation block, and if the activation block is there, it then goes ahead and looks for a frame. So when it's looking for a frame, it's then going to go to the check frame folder, and here you can have a different folder for each portal you want to make. Looking at bottom.mc function, all it is going to do is check every single block where the frame needs to be, and this is for a nether portal shaped frame, which is the same as an Aether portal shaped frame. All it's doing is checking every single block of the frame to see if it is from this frame Aether tag. It is also checking the inside of the frame to make sure that it's in the air tag. So that's just making sure that the frame is complete and it is also empty. So if all those blocks are in the correct place, it's then going to run the relevant activation function. And this is testing every possible orientation, because you could build a frame that is along the x-axis or along the z-axis. So basically, it's just going to check every possible way you could have built a frame. And then the mid and top functions are the same, except of course moved up 1 block and 2 blocks respectively, because you don't always have to place the activation block on the very bottom of the frame. So as you can see, if I go all the way over here, run 1 of 2 creation functions at the right place. So if the portal frame is along the z-axis, it is then going to run this z-axis function to create a portal along the z-axis, and if it's along the x-axis, it's going to do the same thing with the x-axis. And this part right here determines where exactly it needs to do that. If you place the activation block on the north side of the portal, it's just going to run the function as normal, but if you place it on the south side of the portal, it's then going to move the position 1 block over and do this same function. And you'll notice that it's doing that exact same thing here, except it's also moving it down 1 block, and the same thing here, except it is also moving it down 2 blocks. So that way, wherever you put the activation block in the frame, it will end up doing the exact same function in the exact same place. Now, if we go on to what that function actually is, it is activate create either z. So if I close this and go to activate create either z, we'll see what it's actually doing. So it is filling the inside of the frame with moving pistons, and that is going to make it so nobody can place any blocks inside of the frame, because moving pistons are invisible and you can walk through them, but you can't place any blocks. So it fills the entire inside with moving pistons, and then it is going to summon an armor stand inside of every block in the frame. And those armor stands are both going to be detecting if there is an entity there that they need to teleport, as well as holding a custom item on their head that has the texture of the portal itself. So the armor items part over here is optional, because you don't need to have the custom portal blocks thing. However, you are going to need to summon the armor stands, because they're what checks if a player needs to teleport. Then this section here is summoning a marker, and this marker is going to sit in the frame and do everything that the portal does. It's going to be actually teleporting players. It's going to create portals in the other dimension if someone needs to teleport to the other dimension, and it is also going to be checking if the portal is broken. So this marker is the most important thing in the function. And then this is an optional part. It's going to play a specific noise when the portal opens. I've just made that the end portal opening sound. So this is the create z function, but there's also the create x function, which, as you can see, is exactly the same except with different coordinates, because it's creating a portal that's aligned along the x-axis instead of along the z-axis. So all of that is how the portal actually gets activated, but we haven't even gotten to the part about how the portal works. But thankfully that's a little bit simpler. If you go to the tick function, you'll see that after all of that stuff that I just showed you, it's then going to run the function WAB portals run main either. So if I go to run, I can then go to main and either, and this is going to control everything that the portal itself does. So here it's going to execute as a portal stand, which is the armor stands that it created over here in the create functions, executing as those in the overworld. So any portal that has been created in the overworld at S, if there is a valid traveling entity within half a block of that portal that has a cooldown of 0, it will then find the portal marker that is within the portal that I was just talking about a minute ago, and then go to the either and force load that position. Basically, all that's doing is, if there is a player standing within a portal, the marker of that portal is going to load the other dimension, and this line underneath it does the exact same thing except for the second dimension. This line up here is for detecting if there's a player who wants to teleport from the overworld to the other dimension, and this line right here is for detecting if there's a player that wants to teleport from that dimension back to the overworld. So then this line down here, the first part of it is doing the same thing as up there. You'll see that the code is exactly the same if you look at these two lines. It's doing the exact same thing. It is finding the marker of the portal that the player wants to teleport from, and then checking in the other dimension if there is a portal that is available to teleport to. So, in the Aether, if there is an entity which is a marker and has the tag Aether marker, and is in the Aether, then it is going to select that person who wants to travel, so as at E, predicate equals travelers all mobs, and then run the teleport Aether dimension 1 command. And then this line below is doing the exact same thing, but for people that want to teleport from the Aether to the overworld. So if I go to teleport Aether dimension 1, all that is doing is executing in the Aether at the right portal, teleport to that location, and then it is setting the cooldown, which means you can't immediately be teleported back. And the cooldown is 300 because that is 15 seconds. Then all it's doing after that is getting rid of any force-loaded chunks, because that will help clear up any lag. Then of course, Dimension 2 is doing the same thing, except teleporting to the overworld. Back to the main Aether function, there might not actually be a portal in that location. So again, this is the exact same code mostly as these two above it. Actually, the exact same as the line above, except instead of checking if there is a portal in the other dimension, it's checking if there is not a portal in the other dimension. And so if there is not a portal in the other dimension, it is going to find the marker that belongs to the portal that the player that wants to be teleported is standing in, and then it is going to run the function create alternate Aether dimension 1, which is just going to create a portal in the other dimension. And then this line down here is the exact same, except that it is for if people want to teleport from the other dimension back to the overworld, it will create a portal in the overworld. Again, if I go to the create alternate folder, you can see that this is basically exactly the same thing as, where is it? The create file, except instead of just making moving pistons, it is also going to place the portal frame block because it needs to create the frame and the stuff inside. And then it's going to do the same thing with the armor stands that I talked about earlier, and it's going to summon the marker that I talked about earlier, and it is going to play the opening portal sound. And then lastly, it's also going to remove the force load that was created, because, as I said, that will remove unnecessary lag. Then, of course, the Dimension 2 one is the exact same thing, except it's for creating a portal in the overworld from the Aether. And finally, the last function is going to be running the check if broken function by portals along the z-axis and portals along the x-axis. So if I go to the check if broken folder, you will see that basically what it's doing is checking if all of the blocks in the frame are there, and if they are all there, it adds the tag unbroken. And then if it is not unbroken, it will then kill all of the portal stands. And if it is not unbroken, it will get rid of all of the moving pistons. But again, if you used air instead of moving pistons, this is optional. If it is not unbroken, it will play a breaking sound at the location of all of the armor stands that it destroyed, and that is optional. You don't have to have a breaking sound. Then lastly, if it is broken, it will kill the portal stand, which, as I said before, is the most important part of the portal. So if there is no portal stand, the portal itself cannot function. And then at the end of the function, it removes the unbroken tag so it can do this whole searching thing in the next tick. So if this seems too complicated to you and you don't want to make your own version, then you can use my version. So you would have to change this, the name of the functions, and the name of the folders. So every folder that has the word Aether in it would have to be changed to the name of your dimension, and same with all of the tags, like Aether.json here, and same with the predicate Aether.json. And then you would just need to go into all of the predicates and all of the functions and all of the tags and just replace the word Aether with the name of your dimension. So if I go to run and Aether.mc function, I could do Control H and just type in Aether here and replace it with waffle, because maybe my dimension is named waffle. So if I replace every instance of the word Aether with waffle and replace all, then this will work for a dimension named waffle. Although you will need to keep in mind that if it is doing it in a specific dimension, let me see. Like right here, if it says in the dimension, you're then going to need to probably change the first word unless your namespace is also waffle and your dimension is called waffle. And then the only other thing that you're going to need to change is in create alternate, you're going to need to change the name of this block to the name of the block that you want the alternate portal to be made of. So the way I set this all up, it's meant to be easily customizable, and the way I've set it up in folders, you can even make this work for several dimensions at once. So say you want to have portals to like 4 other dimensions, you could just copy the folder named Aether and switch its name to waffle or whatever, and then change the word Aether within the files within that folder to the word waffle, as an example. And so that way you could have 2 different portals next to each other that go to 2 different dimensions. So as you can see, what I have done here is I've created 4 different frames that can have 4 different orientations. So if I get myself some water, most people who play Minecraft are probably familiar with the Aether mod. Basically, it creates another dimension called the Aether, and you can teleport there by creating basically a nether portal out of glowstone and igniting it with water instead of flint and steel. So I've created the 4 different orientations that this works for. Of course, you can make your portal shaped a different way if you modify my code. But anyways, if I right-click with water, as you can see, it plays a really loud activation noise. Let me turn that down. Anyways, it plays a really loud activation noise and then creates this portal. And so if I go into spectator mode, you can kind of see that there are armor stands. If I go ahead and turn off my resource pack, you will see that this is actually retextured snowballs on the heads of armor stands. So let me turn that back on. Also, there will be a download to that resource pack in the description if you would like to get the models and textures and modify them be the color that you would like, or have a different texture or something. Basically, it is exactly the same as the Nether Portal texture, except it is blue and it swirls in a different direction. So let me just make another portal. Yeah, see, it's the same texture, but they swirl a different direction, and it's blue instead of purple. So if you listen to the Nether Portal being broken, it sounds the same as when I break the other portal. And as you can see, as I said earlier, I am right-clicking right now. I'm right-clicking, and as hard as I try, I cannot place a block inside of this frame. However, I can walk and stand inside of the frame. If I walk and stand inside of the frame and then wait for a second, it should automatically teleport me to the other dimension. And that took 1 second. It lagged a little bit, I think, but as you can see, it has created this portal, and I'm now in the other dimension. Even though it looks like the overworld, if I press F3, you can see in the top left that my dimension is Aether. And then if I do /scoreboard players list waffles are better, you can see that I don't have a cooldown anymore, but I should be faster with that next time. So if I go ahead and just go back through the portal, you will see if I do the command again that I have a cooldown of 228. And that keeps going down until it eventually reaches 0. And while that is going down, I can't go through the portal. But, yeah, see, it's 7 now, so I should now be able to go through the portal. Sometimes it lags a tiny bit, but eventually it will work. There we go. But anyways, that is all for this video. If you have any questions about anything that I covered in this video, or as I said in the beginning, if you have any other things you want me to go over, then you can ask me in the comments or join my Discord server, which is linked in the description. Remember, there should be a pack download in the description, so that might be able to help you out. Thank you guys so much for 1,000 subscribers. I've made a separate video on my channel just to thank you guys for 1,000 subscribers, so if you want to be thanked, you can check that out. And thank you so much for watching.